I want you to picture a moment. It's usually quiet. There's no big soundtrack, no dramatic rain outside the window.
Right.
It's just a Tuesday. Maybe you're getting coffee with a friend or a coworker, and in, I don't know, 3 seconds, something shifts.
Mm-hmm.
A look holds for just a fraction too long. Or the tone of their voice just drops a little. And suddenly, without you making any kind of decision, the ground tilts. You walk away feeling like that whole thing meant more.
It's terrifying, isn't it? Because it's completely invisible.
Totally invisible.
You could be in a packed room, and this huge seismic event happens between two people, and absolutely nobody else feels the tremor.
That's exactly it. And if you tried to explain it later, if you tried to present the evidence, you would sound completely unhinged.
Oh, 100%.
You'd be like, well, he looked at me while he was drinking his water. And then your friends are just going to say, okay, so he was thirsty.
Right. We don't have the words for it while we're inside the experience. We only find the language like months later when we're picking through the wreckage.
Which is why today's deep dive is a little different. We're not looking at a study or a news report. We are diving into an essay that I can only describe as uncomfortably accurate.
I think that's the perfect way to put it.
It's called Believing It Meant Something, and it's by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha.
And I think we should set the stage here, because the title could make you think this is, a relationship advice column.
It's not.
It is not. We're not here to decode texts or tell you he's just not that into you. Malha is doing something way more profound. He's giving us a philosophical breakdown of how the human mind actually constructs meaning.
Yes.
How we build these huge emotional cathedrals from the tiniest bricks, and the very specific, very private pain of realizing you were the only one living inside it.
I have to say, reading this felt less like philosophy and more like reading a transcript of my own brain from my early 20s. It's so poetic, but it's also surgical.
Surgical is a great word.
He just dissects the whole mechanism with this precision that makes you want to look away, but you just can't. So let's start where he starts, the arrival.
Okay, so Malha makes this crucial point right at the beginning, meaning doesn't ask for permission.
No.
You don't wake up one morning and decide, you know what? Today feels like a good day to become completely obsessed with this person.
No, absolutely not. Usually you're trying very hard not to do that.
Exactly. Malha says, meaning slips in. It uses the back door. It comes in through repetition or a certain tone of voice. It just bypasses all your logical checkpoints.
He talks about that holds for a fraction longer than required. I love that detail because it's so subjective.
It is.
In a court of law, that evidence gets thrown out immediately.
Yeah.
But to the person on the receiving end, it feels like a smoking gun.
That's because, as he puts it, the ground has tilted. And he makes this distinction between a belief and an orientation.
Right.
In the beginning, you don't necessarily believe they're in love with you. I mean, that's way too strong. But you become oriented toward them.
I love that image, the ground tilting. Because as soon as the floor is slanted, everything just slides in that direction. Neutral things aren't neutral anymore.
Precisely. On flat ground, a text is just a text. But on tilted ground, a text is an event.
With a capital E.
Totally. If they're silent, the silence has a texture, a weight. You start reading the empty spaces just as much as the filled ones.
And the scary part is how it all accumulates. Malha points out that there's rarely that one big I love you moment.
No, it's death by 1,000 glances.
Right. It's this pile of tiny moments, each one with plausible deniability.
And the shift happens, and this is the part I found really fascinating, not when you intellectually decide this means something, but when you start living as if it does.
Ooh, that is a dangerous distinction. You're already operating on this new frequency before you even admitted it to yourself.
Which brings us to the architecture of it all, because we like to think we're just passive observers, like cameras just recording what's happening.
But he argues the mind is active. The mind is an architect. Okay, but can I push back on that a little bit? Because when you say architect, it sounds like we're just making things up, like we're being delusional. Is that what he means?
I don't think he means it's malicious or even fully conscious. It's more like, think of an optical illusion or the blind spot in your vision.
Okay.
Your brain just hates gaps. So if there's a missing piece of information, your brain fills it in with what it thinks should be there based on the pattern around it. Malha is basically saying we do the same thing with emotions.
So we're filling in the emotional blind spot.
That's it. And he calls it emotional grammar. That's a key term in the essay. You start to learn the other person's rhythm.
Right.
If they usually text at 10 and one day they text at 10:05, you don't just see a time difference. You see intent. You read meaning into it. A cadence emerges.
And because that rhythm feels familiar, it starts to feel authoritative. It feels like truth, simply because it's a pattern we now recognize.
Familiarity convinces us without ever making an argument. We think, I know this person. I know what that pause means. But here's where it gets really, really interesting and honestly a bit heartbreaking.
The false mutuality.
Well, he doesn't call it false yet. To the person feeling it, it's just mutuality. It feels shared. And this is where it gets tricky, because he notes that the other person usually doesn't retreat.
They don't contradict your reading of it.
They mirror you just enough.
That just enough is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. But isn't that just leading someone on? It sounds kind of manipulative.
You'd think so, and I'm sure sometimes it is. But Mala argues it's often more subtle. It's not always malice. A lot of times it's just passivity, or maybe they just enjoy the attention. But think about how we interpret their silence in these situations. He points out that the absence of denial starts to feel like an affirmation.
Right. If they're not saying stop, if they're not running away, we assume we're on the same page. The lack of a no becomes a quiet yes.
That's the non-retreat. We assume there's this unspoken contract. We think, oh, we both know what this is, we're just not saying it yet. He writes that it becomes possible to imagine something is being held between you, quietly.
And there's such a tenderness in that, isn't there? It's not about big romantic gestures.
No, it's the small things.
Remembering a tiny detail from your childhood, the timing of their attention. He calls it being seen without being exposed.
Which is such a deeply human desire. We all want that. But once that belief has really settled in, your mind has to protect it. He calls this coherence seeking.
This is where we start editing the movie of our lives in real time.
Yes, your memory becomes selective. If they do something that supports the belief, like they remember your favorite song.
That scene gets highlighted in neon. It goes in the movie trailer.
Exactly.
Right.
But if they do something that contradicts it, like they don't text back for 3 days or they mention someone else, what happens?
We soften it. We explain it away. Oh, they're busy. Oh, they're just scared of their feelings.
We push it to the edge of the frame. Mala says this isn't lying, it's just the mind craving continuity. If we let the doubt in, the whole story falls apart, so the internal narrative stays intact.
He describes this phase as feeling safe, which sounds like a total paradox. I mean, you're walking an emotional tightrope. How is that safe?
It feels safe because the internal story is solid. You know your role, you know their role. And he argues that doubt isn't allowed to disrupt the system.
It gets reframed.
It gets reframed. We tell ourselves, oh, I'm just being anxious because of my past, or I'm self-sabotaging again.
Right.
So we see doubt as our own personal flaw, something to overcome, instead of a signal that maybe our reading of reality is off. The belief stays protected in this little fortress.
And there's this incredible power in the fact that it's all unspoken.
This is a critical point. Naming it feels like a huge risk, and not just the risk of rejection. Mala suggests naming it feels like it might collapse the magic.
It's like Schrodinger's relationship. As long as I don't open the box and ask, so what are we?
Yes.
It can be anything I want it to be.
Precisely. If you speak it, you force it into the world of facts, where it can be disproven. Keep it inside, and it stays in the world of potential, where it's infinite.
Which makes it really resilient.
So resilient. If the warmth cools off, the belief waits. If distance appears, it's rationalized as temporary. The belief isn't resilient because it's true, but because we've poured so much of ourselves into it.
But then, inevitably, the box opens. We get to phase 4. The contradiction.
The arrival of truth.
And what struck me about his description here is how undramatic it usually is. We expect this big cinematic scene, but he says it's often just a quiet, casual sentence.
My girlfriend would love this place.
Oof, yeah. That's the one. Or just an absence that lasts too long to be explained away.
He notes that the contradiction can be almost apologetic, but the effect is the same. The whole structure just collapses. However, and this is the concept I think is the most important part of the entire essay, he introduces the idea of the lag.
Emotional reality lags behind the factual one. That sentence. And it hit me like a truck.
It explains so much about heartbreak, doesn't it? We live in a world where we expect information to change emotion instantly.
Right.
Like, if I tell you it's raining, you just grab an umbrella. The update is immediate. You don't still feel like it's sunny.
But if I find out this was all in my head, I can't just put down the feelings. I can't flip a switch.
No, think of it like a supertanker at sea. If you cut the engines, that's the factual realization, the knowing it's over. The ship doesn't stop.
It keeps going.
It's massive. It has momentum. It's going to keep moving for miles just on the energy you already put into it.
That is such a helpful way to think about it. Because so many of us feel stupid in that moment. We think, I know the truth, so why am I still checking my phone? Why do I still feel this pull?
And Mala says this isn't denial. I think that is so important for people to hear. You're not being crazy. You're not delusional. You're just experiencing continuity.
The feelings are just
Ah.
echoes.
They're the momentum of a reality you lived in. He says the emotional system can't update on command. It carries forward what mattered. And the belief did matter. You built a home there. You can't just dismantle a house in a second because you find out you don't own the land.
Which brings us to the aftermath.
Hmm.
And he uses a phrase here that I think captures the specific flavor of this pain better than anything I've ever read. Internal humiliation.
It is a very specific kind of acid, isn't it? It's not just the pain of rejection. Rejection is almost clean. I asked, you said no. That hurts, but it's simple.
This is different. This is the humiliation of having believed.
Yes, it's realizing you were reading from a script that the other person wasn't even holding.
They were acting in a drama, and they were just living their life.
Exactly. It's the realization that the meaning existed primarily in one place.
Yeah.
In your head. Mala describes this ache that comes from knowing emotional reality doesn't need agreement to exist. You can be profoundly moved by a conversation that, for the other person, was completely forgettable.
That is the unshared meaning. It's so lonely. You're carrying this heavy, significant thing, this glowing memory, but there's nowhere to put it down because the other person doesn't even recognize it.
And he captures the complexity of that aftermath so well. He calls it a field of contradictions. It's not just sadness. It's this mix of relief and loss.
Relief. How is there relief?
Relief because the ambiguity is finally over. The tightrope walk is done. You fell, sure, but at least you're on solid ground now. But at the same time, there's a longing for the illusion. You miss the coherence. You miss the version of the world where it all made sense.
So what do we do with all this?
Yeah.
Because the immediate temptation, at least for me, is to just beat yourself up. To say, I was such an idiot, I was so naive, I will never let this happen again.
And this is where Malha offers his strongest defense. He argues passionately against labeling this experience as a mistake.
But why? It feels like a mistake. It feels like a huge calculation error.
He says the belief didn't come from stupidity. It came from engagement. It came from attentiveness. You were responding to something that felt real. You were paying attention to the world. You were listening to the tone, watching the eyes. You were alive to the signals.
I love that reframe. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a response, an amplified response maybe, but it was based on something.
Yes. And Ma warns that the real danger isn't in having believed in the first place. The real danger is in the overcorrection. The danger is pretending it meant nothing just because it wasn't returned.
Right, the sour grapes approach. Oh, I never even liked them anyway.
Exactly. If you do that, you're erasing the complexity of your own experience. You're simplifying your life into an error instead of acknowledging it was something you lived through.
So long after the fact, the belief shifts. It stops being true. You're not getting married, but it can remain meaningful.
It becomes part of your internal archive. It shapes who you are. Maybe it makes you more cautious, or maybe it makes you appreciate clarity more. But it can coexist with the truth. You can say, that happened inside me, and it was real for me, without needing anyone else to validate it.
It's almost like you have to forgive yourself for being human, for having an imagination.
Precisely. Mala concludes that there's no clean lesson here. There's no corrective insight where you go, aha, now I've mastered my emotions and will never misread a signal again.
Because to never do that again would mean you'd have to shut down. You'd have to stop being open to those small signals. You'd have to be a robot.
And that's the final takeaway. He says what endures is the knowledge that one is capable of believing, that you can be moved by small things without any guarantees.
It exposes you, sure. Makes you vulnerable to looking foolish.
But it proves you're alive. It shows your emotional system is working. You're interpreting, you're inferring, you're feeling. The fact that the signal was unshared doesn't mean your receiver is broken.
Unshared meaning. It's a heavy thing to carry, but maybe it doesn't have to be a burden. Maybe it's just evidence of capacity. Evidence that you have a heart that works.
I think that's the healthiest way to see it. He suggests we let these experiences become questions that no longer seek answers.
I really like that. Questions that no longer seek answers.
We don't have to solve them. We don't have to vindicate ourselves. We don't need to call the person and demand they admit they were flirting. We just need to recognize that we lived through it.
That is a powerful place to end up. It's not about getting closure from someone else. It's about accepting the validity of your own experience, even the parts that got it wrong.
Especially the parts that got it wrong, because they show how ready we are to connect.
Well, this has been, I want to say heavy, but in a good way. It feels like we just put words to something that happens to everyone but gets talked about by almost no one.
It's the landscape of the unsaid. It's where a lot of us live a lot of the time.
So here's our final thought for you to mull over. Think about those moments in your past, the almost relationships, the silent understandings that were actually misunderstandings. Can you look back at them not with embarrassment, but with a little bit of respect for your own ability to feel so deeply? Can you let those unshared meanings just exist in your history without needing to label them as mistakes?
It's a tough ask, but I think it's the path to making peace with your own heart.
Thank you for diving deep with us today. This essay by Pedro Malha, Believing It Meant Something, is just a gem, and I really hope we did it justice.
It was a pleasure to unpack it.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Take care of yourselves.